This morning, Lee Rainey gave us a good foundation of the research that his organization has been doing on the current state of internet use and some unique ways that people were using it, especially younger people who are going to be college students with us in the next few years. Now I'd like to turn this over to our lunch speaker, Bryan Alexander, who is the research director for NITELY, the National Institute for Technology and Liberal Education. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Ooh. Okay, all right. So in Bryan's role, he basically explores the way that emerging technologies can be used in creative, effective, and sustainable ways to teach at liberal arts, a consortium of liberal arts institutions throughout the country. I first met Bryan whenever he was at EDUCAUSE. There was a special forum on mobile learning. And you know, I feel like I'm pretty good with technology and everything, but what Bryan was showing was completely blowing me away. He was talking about smart mobs and geotagging, digital storytelling using things like Flickr. And I was just really impressed and thought that that would be a really a great asset to expose to the Penn State community, because he's not talking about frequencies or hardware or what XML tag is going to get you to where you want to go. He's talking about real stories, real teaching moments. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bryan, and I'm sure he'll be fascinating.
I better be. Is this loud enough? I was kind of hoping that everyone would just fall backwards. Whoa, it's too loud. All right. Thank you very much for that insidious introduction. I'm very glad to be here, and not just because there's still snow where I live. I'm very glad to see all these people here, not just because there are so many Twitterites. I'm kind of stunned to see so many people tweeting away. I'm going to quickly run through a whole bunch of topics, but because this is after lunch and that kind of post-carbohydrate coma is starting to settle in, I'll show you a movie first. And what I'm showing you is totally unremarkable. What you're looking at is a NASA visualization from 2 years ago. This describes the descent of the Huygens probe onto the surface of Titan from orbit around Saturn. This is a single movie. The orange ball in the middle is the photograph of the surface of Titan glimpsed step by step as the probe descends. Titan's shrouded in a thick atmosphere, so you can't really see it. This is the first time we got to glimpse beneath the cloud cover. On the right, that series of boxes is readouts covering altitude, magnetism, all sorts of chemical readouts. The sound you're hearing is two different tracks. That are radar imaging going back and forth. The whistling is partly composed of sounds recorded by a mic on the outside of the probe as it drops into this alien world. You see the resolutions begin to peak up as the probe is getting closer and closer. Let me speed this up a little bit so I can help you survive the drama. As you get closer, the distortion is caused by the lens. The sound pitch changes, and then that's actually a shot from the base of the probe before it died. Now I'm showing you this partly because it's so cool, but I'm showing it to you because it's unremarkable. The reason NASA survives has nothing to do with its science or technological innovations. The reason voters don't exterminate NASA like Congress frequently wants them to do is because NASA produces beautiful eye candy. That's its main appeal to the American voter who can't follow telescopic science. NASA designs these things very carefully. They assume that the average viewer would find this appealing. And when I show this to audiences, when I show this to Lee Rainey's crowd, they say, oh, cool, can I download this? Where do I play? Are there other people here? Can I see it? If you find that intimidating, don't be alarmed. I think you should in some ways. But that is unremarkable. That's part of the background of what I'd like to show you. Now, I have a PowerPoint presentation. Some of you know I like to apologize when I do that. I use PowerPoint mostly to archive screen captures. I like to present from the web, but I found that the more people watch me do that, the slower the web becomes. I think it's a scientific phenomenon. It's a kind of entanglement with the Heisenberg effect. So what I'm going to do is go through quickly. I want to sketch out a series of things that are emerging. And this is what the kind of ground that we covered in the Horizon report. So I'm going to begin maybe half of my talk talking about social media, Web 2.0. The reason is that's more fully developed than any of these. And we can learn a lot of lessons from that, which we apply to other fields. Then I want to move on to talk about mobility, then gaming, and then some emerging forms that are appearing all around that. Two themes that underline all this. One is we're going to be talking about emergence. And when you hear emergence, if you think of Stephen Johnson's work, for example, we often think of emergence in time. Last night we were talking about Twitter, and someone said, yeah, I miss the old days of Twitter a month and a half ago. Things move fast, and some things are like that. But at the same time, some things emerge in space, especially for higher education in the United States. I'm often told that wikis are emergent technologies. And I first used a wiki in 1999. The first German financial institution to roll one out for an intranet is from 1998. Wikis are not new, but they are just hitting academia in many ways. The second thing is I want to emphasize pedagogy. My focus here is to emphasize teaching and learning and how that appears from these technologies and practices. I also want to give you a little anecdote because movies work. This is a little Web 2.0 story. How many of you have seen the movie La Jetée? 1962, Chris Marker. Obviously, nobody knows what I'm talking about. How many of you have seen 12 Monkeys, the Terry Gilliam film? Right, okay, well, it's based on La Jetée. La Jetée is a very short film. It's about 13 minutes long. It is entirely composed of static photographs, with one exception, which I'll let you discover. It's a voiceover story. It's very, very compelling. It's hard to find, as you can tell from none of you who have found it. So on the web, I discovered this on a blog that I read. Those of you who follow Second Life, this is Warren Ellis' blog. He's a Reuters reporter for Second Life, very funny guy. And he quickly commented on this, copied it, and put comments on it from other people as well who remarked upon it. So I naturally hit other websites that, oh, great, La Jetée is available. And I went to Google Video, went to YouTube, I found different translations, French, Spanish, subtitled, not subtitled. Then I blogged it myself over on one of the blogs I run called InfoCult. If you have a hard time sleeping at night, please go to InfoCult. It will cure your insomnia. And I copied this, put comments on it, continued the conversation still further. Why do I mention this? Well, one reason is because we tend to perceive the web as being at the cusp of the new. But in reality, we have a love, a pleasure, a deep pleasure in archiving. We love, some people out there, some of us, like to put old things from before the web and put them out there on the web for people to see. That's an important learning. The second is, this whole flow of conversation and communication is not the kind of thing that you can do through iTunes. It's not the kind of thing you can do in a closed proprietary database. You can't do this from an Xbox. This is something which depends on a fluid, dynamic information ecology. So that's one little anecdote to get you started. Now, how do you take a look at all this stuff? We're talking about the future. We now know from academia that we have several different modes for apprehending the future. One is, of course, the reliable panic mode. We're very good at that. We've practiced that for some time. We can also trust vendors who will give us things, and that is occasionally reliable. That's a strategy that's pretty popular. We can also use established futurist methods, like the Delphi method. What we do at Nightly is we use networks. We have people all over the world who send us requests, comments, stories, observations, anecdotes, and we try to surface how that could work. I'd like to submit to you that that kind of network approach is a good way for understanding a world of networks. I want to compare how we can do that approach by looking at gaming and Web 2.0 together. Quick show of hands, how many of you guys are computer gamers? Look around the room. Look at how few hands have actually gone up. And those who do are proud. Oh, I'm a gamer. I admit it. Don't laugh at me. Gaming is still something of a stigma, even though it's quite large. If I ask how many of you play computer games or have played computer games, all the hands would go up because everybody has been afflicted with Tetris, Snood, Minesweeper, and so on. When we take a look at Web 2.0 in gaming, they're actually kind of similar from us in academia. These are huge worlds, billion-dollar industries, planet-spanning, developing every day in rapid ways. They're also worlds that get badly covered. If you read the Chronicle of Higher Education, some of us joke that it is the intranet threat or menace school of reporting. It just is very, very intent on giving us bad coverage of technology. In fact, it's very easy to find coverage in CNN or mainstream media elsewhere that emphasizes scary things. Dana Boyd, for example, has observed that while most print media like to emphasize predators on MySpace, it turns out that it is more difficult to be a predator on MySpace than almost any other environment on the surface of the earth. On top of it, wikis, blogs, Second Life, to mention any of these, risks being seen as not very serious. The names are silly. In academia, we don't like the word game. We use game as a metaphor for something frivolous, childlike. We can do some different approaches to projects that are out there right now. I'm going to come back to these as we go. I'm going to quickly leap into Web 2.0. And for those of you who are familiar with it, please nod like you know what I'm talking about. This is going to be, I want to cover some basic ground and pull out a few features. The term itself is so controversial, it is universally established. Everyone likes to use it, and no one has replaced it. You can tear it apart in a few different ways, and I want to pull out a few elements that will be useful for you today. One is that we used to say social software. And the reason we said social software is because our persistent school of thought that argues that computing is antisocial. And that goes back to science fiction and pop culture in the 40s through the 60s. And you have to say social software in order to emphasize the fact that people keep using this stuff to talk to each other. That was replaced or subsumed under Web 2.0. It also says that the web has a history, that we have a decade of practice. Instructional technologists know that most of the world likes to assume the web was born yesterday, invented now, and there's nothing we can learn from the past. The term Web 2.0 summons up that history. One piece. Web 2.0 is about micro-content. If you ever authored an entire page in HTML or Dreamweaver or Arachnophilia, Web 2.0 is a lot easier. Micro-content is a sentence that you add to a wiki, a blog post, a photo you upload to Flickr, a tweet in Twitter, small pieces of content. It's also authored by multiple people. Now, that's true of Web 1.0, which is to say, everything on the web. But if you look at the CNN homepage, there's a banner authored by somebody, a menu authored by somebody else, content written by somebody else in Atlanta. But Web 2.0 emphasizes this as a kind of default state. And when I was first giving a talk about this from a wiki, at the top there you can see my notes. At the bottom, someone edited the page as I was speaking and added a really nice series of anecdotes and examples, which is very nice, and I've used that ever since. Another feature of Web 2.0 is that descriptively and prescriptively we say that it's very open, based on open content. So I can look at this Peeps blog. Does anyone else here read this? I know you all read 17th century literature daily, so this is not entirely new. This is a diary of a British functionary in London from the 1660s. Fascinating fellow, hung out with a very broke, sex-crazed, and scientifically oriented king, writes about his wife, his mistress, and his other mistress, and London burns down, gets hit by a plague, and worst of all, they lose a war to the Dutch. It's a fascinating period, and it's almost unteachable. But a London programmer published it as a blog, with, on every calendar day, an entry from the calendar day in 1660-something, so you can follow it along. But you can only do this because it's open. No password required, no login, no purchase. And as a result, when you combine that open access to micro-content and social software, you get distributed conversations. People post all over the Peeps blog, for example, devotees of London geography, English teachers, first-time readers, people simply randomly hitting the blog. And the other people blog about this elsewhere, leading to conversations rippling across the blogosphere. Another part of Web 2.0 are data mashups, where you simply combine data streams from two or more sources. Here, this is a combination putting Flickr to Google Images, or Google Maps. Tim O'Reilly wrote the term up and afflicted us with many side effects. And one is he declared that Web 2.0 was in perpetual beta. I don't think that was true then, but every developer has said, oh, thanks, Tim, I'm in beta forever. And so everything, Web 2.0 is perpetually in beta. Enterprises are built on beta solutions now. But one key feature about that is Web 2.0 projects tend to be fluid. They're not re-released in a huge, overdetermined way. They tend to tweak, merge, and adjust day by day. The technology behind Web 2.0, some insist it's Ajax. That's not true. It's also offered by Flash. But with the mashups and with open content, you can build things on top of it. Let me see a quick show of hands for the sleep deprived. How many of you use Pandora? Oh, yeah. The rest of you, don't do this. Do not do this. This is like saying, here, crack cocaine. Try some, it's free. Pandora is a music site that lets you find more music, and weeks will go by and your family will abandon you. Don't do this. But it's not social, it's you versus the database. Well, the programmer thought this was pretty cool and built a social function on top of it called Last FM and Last Pandora. So you can take your Pandora music experience and afflict it on the rest of the world. The key point is you can develop something, which you can't do with somebody else's page in a Web 1.0 way. Examples and projects I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but I want to put them out here just so you can see how far this world has gone. The Web 2.0 is not just a fad. The wiki platform, of course. A few things about that without going into detail, and I can at the end come back if you guys are curious. One feature about wikis that's really interesting and surprising is they are textually productive. They tend to reward people making more stuff. This is a study from IBM showing that Wikipedia entries kept growing quantitatively even when participants had every incentive to edit against them. This is from Wikinews, which is based on the South Korean OMI-News, a wiki-based project where participants add, contribute wiki articles, edit wiki articles in order to make news stories. OMI-News is now a first-ranked news source in South Korea. Wikinews is actually pretty reliable. Second chunk of Web 2.0 would be the blogosphere. Let's see, how many of you currently maintain blogs? Oh, amazing, amazing. Please let me indulge in a personal moment. 5 years ago when I would ask about blogs, people would ask me if I had a speech disorder, or a technologist would say, server logs? They're very interesting. No, blogs, this is brand new in many ways, but they've become enormous. A blog is a website that consists of micro-content arranged in reverse chronological order. Each chunk of content can be addressed, linked to, dealt with. They support distributed conversations of all kinds, and it's big. When I try to convince academics that blogs matter, I used to point to Toonzine, the first blogger in Tunisia, who was arrested, tortured, and executed for his blog. That usually depresses people. They say, oh, I don't want to do that. Let me try another argument. Technorati now says there are about 70 million live blogs in the world. And the charts all look like this. Now, the big worry is, will the human race become the blogosphere in a decade, or will this merely become something small in scope, like, say, the novel? It's an enormous field of content created by users. The diversity of blogs is huge, almost indescribable. Every topic you can find a blog for right now. There are other Web 2.0 style projects. I just want to touch on a couple of them and then move on to another topic. But Flickr is a pretty popular one for social photo sharing. Again, you have micro-content, social software, open content. And Flickr is enormous. If you join Flickr and you're a US citizen, please welcome to the minority. 3/4 of Flickrites are not from the US. Think about academic content and digital images. Think about what a global world that is, and how not using it is a different choice. It's searchable by tags, which we'll talk about in a minute. The key thing here, architecturally, is what I think Tom Zylstra hit on best, that if you have social software, if you have objects that people want to look at, what you've done is create an architecture based on the social interaction with the objects. Zylstra refers to this as a kind of triangle, with you, your digital object, and somebody else in the world who's interested. That's a profoundly different way of organizing software than we've done in higher education. Now, the tags, Lee mentioned earlier this morning, where you can tag objects as you go. These have become very popular. They led to a movement for describing metadata called folksonomies. And these are still very controversial, but there are quite a few projects. A folksonomy is when you tag your own content. So you might remember back in the old days when you had print photographs. I love saying that. I showed it in the Thematics to my daughter, and she thought, wow, what a cool thing. When will they make this? Well, but in the 20th century, you've heard of that, I'm sure. But in the back of a photograph, you would write a note about where you were. I was in Ireland, here, drinking too much, or whatever. You could take all those tags, and you can then manipulate them digitally. This is useful for all sorts of things. For a person, you can use this to search your own stuff. You can find out something about you. That haze of tags there is unreadable at first glance, but when you run your eyes across it, you actually get a sense of what that person is about. For a community, you can have people tag in order to generate a lexicon or an ontology of words and interests that they're interested in. You can then use this to surface attitudes that are beneath the surface, to try to understand what a community is thinking about. People use this in knowledge management and corporations and the government all the time. This is an example from a museum project. Here's an example from pen tags you're probably all familiar with, a library project at the University of Pennsylvania in order to use tags to take a look at books as well as the web itself. RSS is the most famous, and I'm afraid the most frustrating Web 2.0 technology. The reason it's the most frustrating is because it's a geek-only technology. If you try to use RSS and you're not a geek, you will be punished. You'll be punished by XML or by boredom. If you don't know what I mean by XML, see what I mean? And if you don't know what I mean by boredom, I can introduce you to some sources. RSS, however, once you get past the geekery, and I can get anybody past it in 5 minutes, will make your life easier. It lets you read the web in a more efficient, flexible way. All of this is the only way I think that you can get at MySpace and Facebook. You need to understand the micro-content, understand why people are online on Facebook all the time, because they're constantly twisting it. They're constantly checking that picture, tagging this, putting a comment on someone else's page. And if you know that the social object is the person, now you begin to see why this is innovative and interesting. But if you think it's gone too far, you're in the wrong country. Go to South Korea and take a look at Cyworld. Well, right now, the population using Cyworld in South Korea is approaching 1/2 of South Korea. Not teenagers, but people living in South Korea. That's pretty widespread. If you're a news junkie, you can take in your news through Web 2.0, which generates commentary as you go. And this is how you can talk about rich media. This is the first podcaster. If you don't recognize him, shame on you. But podcasting comes about in an attempt to try to take Web 2.0 and expand into audio. There were a few attempts to do this before it took off. Audio blogging, phone blogging, none of them really worked. When podcasting took off, as you of course know, many of you do podcasts or listen to podcasts, all the charts go up. I don't think that's interesting. I think the words are more interesting. Neologisms always tell you something about what's going on for real. So to know about godcasting, nanocasting, pod fading. Podcasting is so old now that people have started podcasting, done it for a while, and grown tired of it or burned out. Pod safe, those who might be interested, that refers to either copyright or adult content. Welcome to American Politics 101. Pod spamming, podvertising, porn casting. Well, that's the world we live in, isn't it? There are also other audio techniques. If you don't know Freesound, let me recommend it to you. This is a project at the University of Florida. People upload sounds that they record. Footsteps, rain, hammer striking CD case. And they upload it to be shared and used by other people for you in your presentation or your movie. It's a pretty exciting project. This is how you get at Web 2.0 video. This is how you have to understand YouTube. It's not just about that left part of the screen. It's also about all the tags and everything else that goes alongside it. Here, I don't think I can explain it fully. I think I might need an assistant to help me explain. So when you take a look at this interface, you'll see a bunch of these, where on the right you have all the social, oh, I'm slowing down the web by touching it. I told you this would happen. Well, if that's gonna, wait, can it be?
What I am...
Hang on a second. This is a podcaster of great academic heft, and you should listen carefully to this and take notes. There will be a quiz.
Ninja, he's ninja, she is ninja too. I am ninja, we are ninja, but I believe that you are ninja too.
Hiya! Ask a Ninja special delivery. What is podcasting? People over the age of 12 have asked a ninja, what is podcasting? Right now, you've got stuff out there like TV, which is like a piece of wood. It's as interesting as watching grass grow. It's as interesting as watching wood be wood. Podcasting is active, brass tacks. On one end, you got the kid. Let's call him Jason. And he's bored. And he's sitting there going, what's cool? dude. Yes, because that's the way kids talk right now. Jason is a whale, and he's swimming around the internet, and he's in a whole pod of whales. That's where the term comes from. And they're looking to eat stuff, and the content on the internet is the brine, and it's just like, okay, there's another shrimp, and there's another stupid one video, and there's a guy yelling at a brick wall. That's interesting. And then, oh look, there's Eva Longoria juggling a chainsaw. But then he comes across us, a podcast, every week, consistent content coming at him like, yeah. And then if I kept doing that, you'd see it's on a regular basis. I go, yeah, but it was consistently coming at him like an apple pie. And if you're a whale and all you've ever eaten is shrimp, and then somebody gives you an apple pie, you're like, holy smokes, this is delicious. And then when you find out that there's a factory that produces apple pies every week, then those whales just line up outside the factory, and then we feed them apple pie. That's the simplest way to explain it. We are a factory that produces apple pies for whales. I look forward to feeding you apple pie soon. Well, that doesn't sound threatening at all.
I mean, I guess I'm really done, but that's Ask a Ninja, and if you haven't watched it, you should. It's an example of something that we don't have a good term for. Video blogging, vlogging. There's actually an award called the Vloggy, and it really does sound like you're talking about Dracula instead. But video blogs are increasingly popular. The reason they're not as big as podcasting is because they are much harder to do, as anyone who's made video knows. But they are popular. In fact, I used to talk about Rocket Boom, and Amanda Congdon started the video blog, already got fired, and is now working for a major news agency. All this is pedagogical. All this has pedagogical impact, and we have case stories or cases of people trying this out for the first time. A lot of Web 2.0 technologies pick up Web 1.0 pedagogies that we already know about. Here's the list. I don't like to read PowerPoint slides out loud to people, but you can see most of these are pedagogies that we know. Web 2.0 makes a lot of these easier. You can also take pre-web technologies like journaling and media literacy, and they apply to Web 2.0 in many ways even more so. Course management systems, you use Angel here. Some of the other ones like Moodle, Sakai, Blackboard, WebCT, often are starting to look at Web 2.0 technologies. Moodle, for example, has a wiki built in. Blackboard, I had a lunch meeting with the head of marketing for Blackboard who said, so tell me, Brian, what is Web 2.0? And a week later, they released this. I feel guilty. Blackboard Beyond is our attempt to do Web 2.0. They bought the domain scholar.com, which is a kind of social bookmarking system for people using Blackboard. There are other principles that you can derive from this that are unique to Web 2.0, and here are a couple. Distributed conversation has all sorts of pedagogical needs. When you have a student who's entering into a global conversation, that's different than having them participate in a single discussion board behind a firewall. Collaborative writing, wikis, and blogs are very different tools for collaborative writing, very powerful ones. Object-oriented discussion is when you take an object, like this photo here, this is used by a professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, and you hang discussion threads from it. This is very basic pedagogy for images. You can do that with sounds and video. Web 2.0 has a few principles with it. It's easier to make Web 2.0 projects than most Web 1.0. It's easier to personalize. Lee talked about the net generation that's already accustomed to this in many ways, and I don't need to repeat it. It's an enormously influential study that Lee helped shepherd. I would add this comment from a writing instructor. We're worried about digital technologies versus reading, digital technologies versus writing. It's important to realize that these digital technologies are often about reading and writing. As Kathleen Yancey observes, students are making all this stuff and no one is making them do it. I'm going to pop on ahead and skim through here. Pause on one detail. American culture invented the idea of the public intellectual. That's because America invented the idea of restraining the intellectual. So it became notable when the intellectuals came out and spoke to humans in public. That idea goes back to the 1920s. Every generation or so, we go through a cycle of celebrating them, denigrating them, wishing they were back, making some new ones. Podcasting and blogging has brought that back. That's not pedagogical as such, but it is a researcher for this. Some of the most widely read bloggers are, of course, academics. There are problems with Web 2.0 pedagogy. I'm going to skip that slide. If you're curious, we can come back to it, but I'm conscious of time. Mobile phones. Well, they take all of Web 2.0 affordances and make them even more. They take everything that we know about Web 2.0 and make it ambient. So if we have ubiquitous computing, if you have always-on access, so those of you who are using your Pocket PC or your cell phone or your laptop to access the computer like those Mac guys there right now, you're beginning to have more access to editing wikis, to blogging as you go. Another feature is that it accelerates all this transformation. I mean, wikis are pretty good. Twitter is great, and you can edit it from your cell phone. You have more opportunities to Twitter than you normally did. So the pace of change, the development, the audience grows. And on top of that, if you're mobile and have wireless, you can annotate the world. There's a term for this from MIT and the Department of Defense that is ugly, but we still use it, called augmented reality. This is when you take a piece of digital information, you locate it to a physical object. There are many projects that do this right now. The most famous one is 34 West, 118 North in Los Angeles, where they have a city block, and they give people GPS phones, along with tablet PCs, walk around this block and pull down digital content chunks associated with different points in that block. So if you walk in the front door, you get the introductory text, walk around a bit here, a sound file comes down, and so on. That's something that's new. We have a weak form of this with Google Maps. Those of you who have built any kind of virtual reality, you can use that kind of thing here. But with mobility, you can actually annotate the world as you go by, which is, to say revolutionary is something of an understatement. There's more to it. But this is one, I don't mean to be too referential here, but every presentation in mobile technology has a slide like this. And the reason is because device convergence has not happened. Quite the opposite has happened. We have device exfoliation. We have multiple devices. We tend to use them for one thing only. Except in the US. The rest of the world has gone off and discovered the cell phone. The US has buried it. The rest of the world is convinced the cell phone is a powerful computing tool. There are businesses around the world that use the cell phone. There are books about that. I helped edit Howard Rheingold's Smart Mobs out there in the lobby. Buy it now, it's a good copy. But one of the things he observed was that there's social transformations that happen. Social movements were enabled by mobile computing, except in the US. Media capture, media production enabled by cell phone, except in the US. We use the phone for yakking. We tend not to use it for text, for photography, for video. Think about Lee's chart with the two columns. We have devices that can do these things, and we tend not to use them. Even the capacities are poor. You get better hardware and software for phones in North Africa than you do in the United States, not to mention coverage. This is one example here. In London bombings, the best photography of the event came from British citizens going through London with their cell phones, uploading them to the BBC. The BBC reconfigured itself so that it could publish these photos as you went. Imagine doing this in the US. We simply wouldn't. There are pedagogies that emerge from that. And in the US, in the second world of mobile computing, we're beginning slowly, step by step, to come closer to them. So I want to show you a few of them in this kindergarten level, so that maybe next year when we're in third grade, you begin to see how they grow. You can pull down information anywhere. That might not seem very sexy or obvious until you've had to settle a bet in a bar, which has been, by the way, the source of a wonderful Swedish genomics project. Information on demand when you're walking across a quad, when you're in a movie theater, being able to pull down Google or the Internet Movie Database, that's very powerful. Your time usage changes. When does the student working day begin? 10 p.m.? People are seriously considering, well, maybe 11 p.m. It's a serious issue. You can change time when you have mobile devices because you can carry it around and work in different time areas as you move around. These are a few of the other pedagogies that I'm sure you might be familiar with. The personal intimacy with units, though, I do want to emphasize. If you give someone a mobile device and they carry it with them close to their body, and you ask them to write, they are more likely to write a personal subject than if you give them a laptop computer or a desktop computer. It's kind of obvious when you think about it. If you're going to a computer lab, you're not as likely to write about your sweetheart or about your first kiss, where everyone else can see it. But if it's your Pocket PC, where you can carry it around, it's a little different. And that changes pedagogy when you ask students to write. And it starts to change the way they approach digital material. There are some new forms of pedagogy beginning to appear. Mostly you have to look to Japan, South Korea, France to get examples of it. Scandinavia is especially good. The World Economic Forum rated Denmark as the most technologically sophisticated country in the world, and that's one reason because they have such good wireless. But you can see some cases in the US too. This is a project from John Schott at Carleton College in the Midwest, where he had a bunch of media students go on a road trip to examine media production facilities, New York, Hollywood, Berlin, gave them laptops in order to capture media as they went and blog about it, and then annotate in full Web 2.0 style. So their parents could follow them as they went, and people at these different installations could see this crowd coming, respond to it, and blog as they went. And you could follow the whole process from the outside. It's a form of public social journaling. Gaming. Well, I saw the hands that went up, so I know my task here is kind of daunting. There's a lot to cover, but I want to step at a meta level. How can you talk about gaming in higher education? Why? Let me give you a few serious, sober reasons that don't involve fun. One is, gaming is like film or print now in terms of its ubiquity around the world. It is too big. It is not for teenage boys in New Jersey. It is for the elderly, men, women, girls, boys. It's an enormous cultural presence. That alone makes it worth looking at. A second, remember that NASA video I showed you? They wouldn't have made that without games being so popular. The interfaces of basic technology are beginning to change. Watch CNN or Fox News' TV layout, and you'll see the number of buttons beginning to increase. Gaming is driving that in part. We're also using gaming to create content. How many of you know what machinima is? Those hands. Watch these people. They're dangerous. Machinima refers to videos created by computer games. Not by the game themselves, but by somebody using a computer game to produce three-dimensional images. I can show you a clip if we have time at the end. The most famous example is a comedy show called Red vs. Blue, created using the Halo game. Some of you may remember the French riots of a year and a half ago. A 16-year-old created a 30-minute French political film in one day using a video game called The Movies. This is a different production platform. There are a few other issues as well. If gaming is this big, it's part of the information ecology, it's part of the media. Then we need to study it when we teach students how to perceive media. It's worth studying. There are conferences, scholarly books, scholarly articles, classes, programs. That's another feature of it. And on top of it, the pedagogy. Gaming has all sorts of pedagogical handles and affordances to it. Moreover, it's not easy. Here are a few of the problems you might want to think about. The violence issue is overrated and overstated, but it's nevertheless an important one. The size of players, the Matrix Online was considered a failure because it had only 1 million players. That's pretty small. World of Warcraft, 8 million. This is why people obsess over the numbers in Second Life, which looks like it has about 100 to 200,000. These are very large projects. Henry Jenkins at MIT thinks that gaming is an instance of what he calls transmedia storytelling. When people have a story that occurs across multiple devices and media. You see a film, you then play the game, and then read the novel. On top of that, gaming addresses all sorts of topics. There are current events games, there are war games, economics games, sleeping games, dating games, political arguments, religious games, and literary games. And gaming is rapidly becoming something as widespread as, say, poetry in terms of topics. Now, there's an intersection of Web 2.0. Not much of one, because most gaming is too big. It's macro content, not micro content. But there are some connections. One is people love to use social media to talk about games. If you go through YouTube, you'll see video after video of people playing World of Warcraft or Line Rider or something else. Plus, they like to talk about their experiences. Game developers write up their experiences. And in some of the games, you can make micro content, which you can then share. So in Second Life, one of the reasons for its popularity is because in there, you can create an object in 1 minute and share it with people in Second Life. Second Life itself has grown 2 major types of pedagogical use. And you'll see these if you go through Second Life. I can give you a tour if you want. But you'll see these begin to grow as long as Second Life is around. One is good old-fashioned virtual reality. Back to the early 1990s, producing 3-dimensional objects. A Rome from the 1st century, Chinese house from the 1600s. We've got all of that. The second, and this is the creepy one, if I can pick on you for a second, even though you don't have a beard. Linden Labs calls this emotional bandwidth. If you're on a chat room, those of you who are, or an instant message or email, and you want to tell somebody you're joking, how do you do that? What? LOL, laughing out loud, smiley. I am joking, I'm serious, whatever you like, right? JK for joke. Well, we'll get there, we'll get there. In Second Life, you have other options for it. So the Second Life people, the Linden Labs company thinks that you should be able to watch people's expressions and their body language. That is true, but also this works. If you tell me something, and I do this, what's your immediate response? I don't like what he's saying. If you watch avatars move around Second Life without thinking about it, without doing media criticism, you'll see that people respond emotionally. If he walks away from me, I feel sad. What do I do? Unless I want him to go away. You know, oh, success, I've done it. Emotional bandwidth is part of the affordance of Second Life. In fact, if you watch closely, watch your avatar. It does things that you don't ask it to do. And it's kind of fun because it usually looks bored or flirtatious. And you're there typing away, and somebody else, you're typing at that avatar, and they're doing the same kind of thing. And they're, you know, scratching. And your avatar is flirting with their avatar. You're trying to have a serious conversation. So this four-way conversation. But the fact that that can work shows there's kind of an emotional hook. So you should think about Second Life as something like halfway between video conferencing and instant message. There's storytelling going on in Web 2.0 and through gaming. Do you all know Lonely Girl 15? This is a story told through YouTube where you take micro content and you release it socially. But that's not a very impressive one. What's really impressive, and if you ever feel that you are too geeky, please take a look at this. This is the Web 2.0 game form. This is a very avant-garde form of gaming and storytelling, and I recommend taking a look at it because this is fascinating and complex. Anyone here play alternate reality games? Okay, watch these guys. These are truly dangerous, odd people. And brilliant. Alternate reality games are web-based games that take digital content, distribute it throughout the world, but without telling you that it's a game. This can be websites, email messages, ICQ messages, it can be physical objects mailed to you, it can be located in the physical world. The most famous one was built for the Steven Spielberg movie AI, which had ultimately about 100,000 people playing it. There is one right now being designed for Nine Inch Nails for the new album. There's a political one that's due to be released later this month. These are played collaboratively by hundreds of thousands of people around the world. They're puzzle-based and have great complexity. I can tell you more about them, but I just want to put this out there because this is an emerging form of storytelling that is already creating businesses and educational models. People study these in class and now are starting to make them. We close out with a visual. Every form of art is based on some kind of limitation, some kind of artificial constriction. We like to do that. We like to have a haiku with a certain syllabary. We like to have poetry with a certain number of lines that you can do. We do this with digital media in all sorts of ways. Here's one example. Flickr has a group called Tell a Story in 5 Images. That's how you do it. You submit 5 photographs. The only text allowed is the title, nothing else. Can't be 4, can't be 6. It's like Monty Python, right? The number of the images must be 5, it cannot be 3. And you tell a story. Let me show you one. This is, the only text is called gender miscommunication. Can you see this okay? I'm sorry, I keep blocking you, I'm sorry. I'll go over here and block them. This is the first image. Second image. She's looking a little sad. Third image. And suddenly he's doing something in this fourth image. She's looking, what, scared? Anticipating? Fifth image. One of the things I like about this is if you go back to you see the first one? See the couple back there? They kind of fade out, but then they come back as a kind of counterpoint. They're going at it, you know. And you know, you don't need any text to describe this. And could you have done this with HTML? Yeah. Could you have emailed this to somebody? Oh, absolutely. But A, Flickr makes this a lot easier to do. Again, the ease of entry. Micro content, all you're uploading are individual photos. And B, it's social. Check this out. This is a commentary for something else. Every one of these, object-oriented discussion, has a comment thread hanging from it. So here, we have a series of responses to another story, where one person, Gustavo G, says, consider the same photos in a different order. 1, 5, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Somebody else, Violet Danger, interprets it. And then at the bottom, Moliere1331, is the author and explains what she had in mind. It's a workshop. It's a social workshop. So the people get feedback. You get to learn about photography and about storytelling. Now, you could do this with Web 1.0, but it'd be damn hard. This makes it easy as can be. And if you want, there's more stuff here. If you want Violet Danger, that's interesting interpretation. Who is that? Click on it, see her photos, and so on. This is a new form of storytelling. Is it pedagogical? Well, I hate to do this, but I have to mention my daughter. This is Bryan Alexander. She's now 12, going on 30, and not a geek. not a technologist. She likes to read fantasy novels. She likes to berate her 6th grade classmates for not being feminist enough. She likes to terrorize her younger brother, of course. And she uses technology without thinking about it. She started a blog because she wanted to talk about fantasy novels. It wasn't fast enough, so she started a multi-wiki page. She invented a game which she plays with 2 friends across the United States, a storytelling game through the wikis. I have done nothing with this. I just watched this go by. But she took a class online in WebCT, which is a course management system, and found it almost unusable. I was asking her about it, watching her carefully. Turned out that that interface is about 5 years old. She doesn't use that. It's hard. It's not very Web 2.0-ish. It's not fun. There's something off with the design of that. Her world now has advanced way beyond that. So here's a provocation. If we design for Lee Rainey's generation of rising kids, are we actually designing for them? Or are we carrying over all these older technologies and pedagogies? Are we doing that thoughtfully? Second provocation. This is a slide from the computer scientist with the greatest name in human history, Valdez Krebs. I wish I was named Valdez Krebs. I tried to get that in Second Life and they wouldn't let me. He's a computer scientist, does wonderful work. It's OrgNet. I recommend it highly. He does a lot of work about network analysis. And this is a project, I think you can't see all the titles. Let me just explain. You know, on Amazon.com, AKA 1/3 of my income, there's the recommendation system. People who bought this also bought that, also bought that, also bought that. You still have money left, Brian. You can spend it, buy this too, right? So what he did was he went through in 2003, 2004, 2005, and tested the echo chamber principle. That is, to what extent is the web an echo chamber? You know, you want to blog about your pizza making school and nobody else, especially not that Republican lawyer over there. You want to have that over there, right? So he went through Amazon, because it's open, and found all these books. And if you look at the left, it tends to be liberal left Democrat books. The Buying of the President, How Much Money War Daddy, Noam Chomsky, Michael Moore, and so on. And those are all linked together, right? People who bought this also bought that. On the right, you've got Bill O'Reilly, Ann Coulter, more Bill O'Reilly, Rush Limbaugh, and they're all linked together. And in the middle are about 3 books out of 90. Now, this isn't really a good test of the echo chamber. People have found that in reality, bloggers actually like to link to people they despise. So you can actually go through back and forth. But this is a good description, I think, of American political polarization. I don't think that's very deep analysis, but you can see that. My question is, when we take a look at Web 2.0, put that on one side, just of this model. When we use closed databases, when we have students publish to a class-only environment for whatever reason, aren't we creating 2 different worlds? Aren't we separating out 2 different information architectures, 2 different sides? That's a kind of grim note to end on. And I don't mean to end on a grim note. But I do want to provoke you and ask you, as Web 2.0, it's not emergent. It's already emerged. It's a planetary creature. It's huge, and most of you are already part of it in some way. In fact, if you Google, you're already using Web 2.0, because Google loves blogs. Because blogs hyperlink like mad, Google rewards hyperlinking. Even if you're not searching for blogs, if you search for stuff, you're increasingly likely to find blogs as an entry. That is a triumph, in many ways, of human creativity and sociability. Now, I want to pause here, because I'm ranting too much, and I want to take questions and comments. How am I doing for time, Al?
You're about up.
About up. So, one quick question. Do we have time for a quick question? One quick question. People are all standing there like, yes, please.
Do you have hope for the future? I mean, we're in a kind of scary world right now where we have people who don't want to communicate with people that are ideas.
Can you hear her? Perfectly attired in pink, by the way, for that question. Do I have hope for the future? Well, I have a dark hope, or a dark worry, and a hope. The dark worry is we have lots of policy that makes these things even scarier. Every year, Congress considers a law to criminalize MySpace, block Amazon. I mean, we've gone through this every single year. Most of the political candidates running for office are very keen to bash computer games. I think a lot of digital media are suffering from our lack of respect for the First Amendment and for some of the other amendments, and also for copyright. Those worry me. But what I do love is the fact that more and more people, as Lee mentioned this morning, are creating content. The students are increasingly published authors, and they're making their own stuff. which often means they're their own copyright authors, that we're watching the renaissance at a planetary level of something like a global village for the first time that we can participate in. And the kids are the ones who are driving it. Man, that's something I'm very optimistic about. Good question.